in unusual quantities. At least 5 states along the river have advised people not to eat certain types of fish from the river at all because of the threat they pose to human health. As you know, we present statistics concerning mortality rates from all diseases and mortality rates from cancer in counties along the river. We're seeing an obvious pattern. The overall conclusion is that mortality rates in counties along the river are higher than in the rest of the nation and tend also to be higher than the rest of counties in Mississippi River states, which are located not along the river. There are 2 patterns which emerge when we look at the mortality data. One is that the highest levels of mortality occur in the areas of the highest toxic discharges and just downstream from those areas. That means St. Louis, Memphis, and Louisiana's chemical corridor. The second important pattern is that as we move down the river, mortality rates increase steadily. So that as we make it to Louisiana, we have some of the highest mortality rates in the nation as the amount of toxic chemicals in the river grows. I want to make it clear that we are not suggesting that these mortality statistics prove causality. They don't prove that toxic chemicals in the river cause increased mortality rates. No statistics can do that. They don't show a cause, they show an effect. And the pattern is clear that high mortality rates overlap areas of high toxic discharge. And that pattern constitutes a call for action for technological and regulatory change. In the report, we look at some of the major sources of contamination in the river. We inventory toxic releases from 106 of the major discharges along the river. We found that those 106 facilities are discharging the virtually unimaginable quantity, 468 million pounds per year of toxic chemicals into the Mississippi River directly or via sewage treatment plants. Those same facilities are discharging almost 1.5 billion pounds of toxic chemicals into the environment each year. Of that total, over 90% comes from chemical manufacturers. A rough ranking of the classes of sources of toxic chemicals into the environment, into the Mississippi River ecosystem, in order of severity, would be chemical manufacturers, pesticide use and manufacture, pulp and paper mills, municipal sewage treatment plants, which allow industries to dump contaminated wastewater into the sewage system. Toxics-intensive industry has clustered along the Mississippi River in the last half-century. The solutions to toxics problems in the Mississippi River, to that extent then, serve as a blueprint for what we need to do nationally to solve the toxics crisis. The Mississippi River is one of the most important examples and the strongest symbols of our national toxics crisis. In that sense, then, the Mississippi River is again a cultural icon. It's a symbol of what we've done to our environment, but at the same time it's a symbol of hope, of what we need to do to solve our problems, of what we need and must do to preserve the environment as a whole. I'm going to introduce to you John Liebman now, who's our Mississippi River and Southern campaigner, who's been working with local and regional grassroots groups all up and down the river for the last 2 years or so.
Thank you. My part of the presentation today is to generally outline what Greenpeace has been doing while compiling the data for this report, for dealing directly with the problems associated with this report, and dealing with the people who are starting to organize throughout both the United States, but in my case, primarily along the Mississippi River. When I first started working on this campaign 2 years ago and moved out here to the Mississippi River, to hotels along the Mississippi River, we were sort of low on contacts. We had plenty of problems, but we didn't have very many solutions. But The other day, we heard a comment come from the Louisiana Chemical Association that their hope for 1990 and the years to come was that Greenpeace, instead of hanging off bridges or blockading bridges, would start building bridges. And they hoped that we would show more understanding. Well, I would like to respond to that comment in that I feel that for the last 2 years, my primary focus on this river has to, in fact, build bridges and to generate understanding, not necessarily with the Chemical Association, because they understand the problems. They know what bridges are out there. But with the people who have been impacted as a result of the emissions into the air, water, and land by chemical users and chemical manufacturers and chemical dischargers on and along the river. To do so, I have literally spent the last 2 years traveling the 10 states on and around the Mississippi River to meet with, to help organize, and to help them counteract the effects and to fight the problems associated with toxic contamination. And believe me, I've seen the worst of the worst, and I've seen organizations come out of nowhere that are forced as a result of chemical contamination to organize, to spend their money, to spend their time and effort to try and create a safer environment. In Minnesota, there's an organization which has been formed in recent years called the Mississippi River Revival. It's an organization that was founded to try and regenerate interest in what they felt was the lost belief that the grand old man, the Mississippi River, was the most important body of water in North America and should be treated as such. They've organized not only in Minnesota, but also in Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Tennessee, and now have full-time offices in both Jackson, Mississippi, and in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to try and spread the word that to understand what is going on in the Mississippi River and its ecosystem that surrounds it, we have to start paying attention ourselves. So they've gotten into great lengths to create educational programs, technical programs, and such to try and get rid of the apathy that surrounds the river as a result of ignorance, which is caused by the belief that what we hear our politicians and our chemical association representatives tell us when they say everything is getting better at a very quickly rate. This report outlines the fact that what is happening to the Mississippi is not necessarily getting better on a daily basis. In Missouri, we have an organization called Public Interest Research Group, which has become a statewide organization in a very powerful way and was responsible in the last year for getting an unheard of law passed, which requires the state to now test for over 130 chemicals which are found in their water. They didn't go after the companies themselves. They wanted to make sure, to ensure the safety of the public, that by cleaning up the water, by identifying the chemicals and pointing out what these chemicals are, that they would have a safer environment and cleaner water to drink. In Tennessee, in the last year, we've seen an organization called Waste Watchers come up, which is a coalition of environmentally concerned people and groups from throughout the state of Tennessee that are trying to prevent the onslaught of chemical contamination similar to what they've seen firsthand on their tours of Louisiana. In Arkansas, there's an organization which has become very organized in the past 2 years called the Environmental Congress of Arkansas, which once again is a coalition of environmental groups and concerned citizens and doctors and scientists and lawyers who are making a very strong effort to try and stop the flow of toxic waste through their state, either from being generated there or being exported to the state. In Mississippi, we have an organization called the Mississippi Environmental Management Organization. Once again, it's a statewide organization of concerned citizens and coalitions that are trying to stop the proliferation of toxic waste incinerators, toxic waste landfills, and the major chemical companies that feel that they can move into communities that we find throughout the United States that need jobs, that need a bolstering of economy, and are willing to sell their environment, their children's lives, their dogs, their cats, and everything else that's alive for the sake of a job on a very short-term economic basis. And then we get to Louisiana, where we find the Louisiana Environmental Action Network and the Sierra Club playing a major role in not only educating the public, but also having the strength to stand up both in the legislature, at the DEQ, on a national level, but most importantly on a local level, to not only inform the citizens of what the pratfalls and what the problems are associated with their local toxic waste incinerator, or what's going to happen when a company comes in and promises them 300 jobs, a stronger tax base, and a destroyed environment. Now, we put all these together, and we created sort of an informal organization called the Mississippi River Environmental Coalition, which is a coalition of leaders of statewide organizations, of large environmental groups throughout these states that are now communicating with each other. We find that in the past, an awful lot of people felt that the problems that were associated with their small communities, such as Revealtown, St. Gabriel, Plaquemine, Donaldsonville, Little Rock, St. Louis, all these communities felt that they were alone, that they were working on their own. But they find that by communicating with each other, that they can become a much more powerful force. They can put all their technical data together that they've either gathered or that other organizations that like them have already found, and that they're starting to speak out. Now, the government and corporate industries refer to these people as NIMBYs, not in my backyard. But we've sent out a proclamation. We don't want it in anybody's backyard. Now, when we talk about bridges, these groups have built bridges between states. It's not uncommon anymore to find that Louisiana is talking to Iowa, that Illinois is talking to Tennessee. Next week there will be a hearing up in Missouri concerning Rollins, which is trying to bring a toxic waste incinerator or landfill, as they claim, into the state of Missouri. The information that will be used to show the environmental degradation in Louisiana will be used in Missouri to show just what the problems are. The people of the United States are tired of environmental contamination. They're tired of children dying. They're tired of hearing chemical companies say that it's their lifestyle that is contaminating or killing their children. They're not going to face up to the facts, and there's been so much misinformation throughout the years that building understanding and building bridges is the only way that the people on the Mississippi River are going to survive. Yesterday, you may have seen that the Louisiana Chemical Association released the toxic release inventory data for 1988, but before the press conference was even over, they had found that the reductions that the LCA had claimed its company members had made was approximately 12%, but was reduced to roughly 9% because of error in estimation. These organizations throughout the Mississippi River region are not asking for estimates. They're doing their own homework. They're doing their own waste audits. They're doing their own mass balance studies. They're finding out what really is the truth. That's all they're asking for. They want to understand what's happening, because when it happens to them, it happens to everybody. Thank you very much.
I know a lot of you looked in the back of the report and have seen the map, which is a shading of the, shows the mortality rates along the Mississippi River that Joe was talking about earlier. There is one error on the, in the coloration and the shading on the map, which is down here at Orleans Parish, which actually has some of the highest rates that we measured.
It should be the darkest shade.
Orleans Parish should be the darkest shade, so it's light. Well, thank you for being so patient as to listen, and we'd like to open it up to any questions now.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Cleveland, what state or what parish or county was the most hostile to Greenpeace's march and organizing efforts?
Louisiana.
Can we get you the microphone?
Louisiana.
Excuse me, sir, to the mic. Hold on.
One thing, to answer your question, which was the most hostile, I would say that it was sort of the best and the worst of both. In Louisiana, we probably, if not undoubtedly, met the most hostile reception by sheer volume of concentration of chemical associations, chemical companies, and employees. While at the same time, we also found that from the community at large, the public citizenry, the people who are being impacted, we also received the warmest reception from them. For years, they had felt that they were the only ones that were fighting their individual battles, or with the help of statewide organizations. So from the public's perception, we received a very, very overwhelmingly positive response. From an industrial and corporate response, it was probably the most hostile.
Can you give us examples of both?
Well, I think that the work that we did last year was supplemented by the Louisiana Environmental Action Network, the Sierra Club, the Gulf Coast Tenants Association, the Ascension Parish Against Toxics, South Louisiana's Against Pollution, was very instrumental in making our trip to Louisiana a success. While at the same time, I think that if we look at the overriding concern that was placed on us by the state police agencies, county, city, and parish agencies, chemical company employees, defamatory statements made by the Louisiana Chemical Association that were totally unfounded, individual chemical corporations trying to destroy not the integrity of the organization, but individuals at large. I think that it was pretty much universal that it was both a very strong positive and also a very strong negative.
Can I ask Pat or Joe, do you drink the water from the river now, the port systems that they have?
Let me add one thing to John's answer. When we were coming down through Louisiana, down the river in general, we did meet and speak with representatives from several industries, Monsanto, Dow. Earlier in the year, we met with DuPont representatives and 3M. And I would like to say that we were, cordially received by the officials of each of these corporations, that our talks were friendly and productive, that at least in a couple of instances, that the corporations did subsequently make public statements, public commitments to reduce their discharges, and we want to applaud those. I was at Marine Shell. We went in the action bus. This was the only place where we were actually met by workers armed with axe handles. We were initially invited to go to Marine Shell. When we arrived there was an effort not, to keep us from getting out of the bus. We did finally exit the bus. We did talk with the officials there, explain to them that all we wanted to do was to split a sample with them. We wanted to get a sample of their aggregate, split it with them so that they could do analyses, so that we could do analyses, so all of us would know what the contamination levels in their aggregate was. After some talk and walking through part of the plant with them, they refused that request. And we have not iterated.
Have you made changes, did you drink the water now or eat fish from the river, or after doing this study, have you decided that?
Well, other studies of the freshwater fish of the nation as a whole show that eating fish may be one of the major routes of exposure for the whole population to toxic chemicals.
Changes, as Pat referred to, and it seems like some of the data is getting to be 8, 9 years old now.
Whenever possible, we've used the most recent data. As far as the release inventories contained in the appendices that detail the toxic discharges from individual facilities, we've used the most current EPA data, the most current TRI data, which is US EPA's database. We've used our own samples and analyses, which were just from last year. And in places where that information did not paint a very complete picture.
Characteristically, you're always going to have some that tell everybody who drinks bottled water and who are concerned over ozone readings on their cities, whether they're in attainment or not, pretty much comparable with each other. There's some in every state. Louisiana, as Pat did say, is probably doing one of the most dramatic turnarounds as far as how much attention is being paid in the legislature and in the governor's office and in the regulatory agencies as to what the problem has been, what the problem is, and how can they decrease the problem in the future.
Ms. Costner, you talked earlier about the technologies that are becoming available. Is that the ultimate solution, not regulation, but in getting the technology to the point where we're not producing these toxic chemicals?
Well, I think you hit on the whole point of our report, which is that regulation is not regulation of emissions and releases is not the solution. And yes, clean technologies do exist. I think one of the best examples is the pulp and paper industry. I mean, in the report we detail the enormous quantities of toxic chemicals released by pulp and paper mills that use chlorine bleaching techniques to bleach their pulp. In Sweden and in many other countries, pulp and paper mills are using available technology which do not depend on chlorine and consequently do not lead to the generation of dioxins, furans, and other highly toxic chemicals. Those technologies exist, they're economically competitive, and many pulp and paper mills in other countries are going to those technologies. We would like very much to see the same move in this country from the pulp and paper industry.
What about the chemical industry, though? They would say that, this is a natural byproduct of the product that we have to make, that people use every day.
As a chemist, as a former industrial chemist, I know that we're quite adept at arranging and rearranging atoms and molecules. I think we've been more or less in our technological adolescence for about the last 40 years, just having a great time playing with atoms and molecules. I think we've come to the point now where we must make wise and rational decisions about the use of that scientific knowledge. I think we are wise enough scientifically to be able to make judgments as to those technologies which are appropriate and those that aren't. I believe that we will and must, over the next 20 years, change our technological base to one that is not toxics dependent. I mean, to even consider that we can continue to produce and disperse persistent bioaccumulative chemicals is simply irrational. I mean, we can't do that. I mean, we already have levels